Hi everyone, welcome to the most updated Esper Dance deck tech. This deck list is for early in the April season. I'm going to be entering this in a MagicFest Online qualifier later today, so I figured I'd give an overview of the deck, highlight some of the changes, and then talk about some of the important cards. First thing I want to start with is the main idea of this deck. If you've never seen or played with it before, it really centers around Doom Foretold, as well as Dance of the Manse. The idea is that early on, we want to be playing enchantments that generate value immediately. Things like Omen of the Sea, Oath of Kaya, and even a Planeswalker like Teferi, which we can minus to draw a card immediately. Then on turn 4, we want to play out our Doom Foretold, forcing our opponents to sacrifice permanents that they need, while on our side, we can continue to sacrifice those enchantments that have already generated their value. Later in the game, we hope to play a large Dance of the Manse, either just to bring back a bunch of enchantments and a Doom Foretold or two for value, or if we can play it for 6 or more, we can actually make all of those enchantments 4/4 creatures and use them to beat down to end the game. Often that's not really necessary, but it is a lot of fun when we can do it. So a couple of the changes I've made that I want to highlight, I did cut the 4 Starfield Mystic, not because I think the card isn't very good, but because of the way the metagame is currently shaping up. So a lot of decks are running answers to the Starfield Mystic, namely Bone Crusher Giant is fairly popular right now, but also things like Claim the Firstborn out of Rakdos Sacrifice and Tyrant Scorn out of the Sultai Ramp decks. So I did cut that, and I've actually added in 2 main deck Aether Gusts. I think that card is very correct right now. If I were to run through the top metagame decks, it would be Bant Ramp, Sultai Ramp, Jeskai Fires, Rakdos Sacrifice, and yeah, that's Temur Reclamation. And Aether Gust hits something or a lot of things in all of those decks. So I think it is correct to be playing that. The nice thing about our deck is it doesn't hit anything in an Esper deck, so we potentially give a lot of our opponents dead cards if they are main decking the Aether Gust. Some other changes, the metagame has gotten pretty go big and grindy, so I've really increased our value cards. So I've added 2 Atresses. That card just generates a lot of value over time, especially when you can buy it back with things like Elspeth Conquers Death. I have also included 4 Thought Erasures. Since a lot of the decks are working towards a big payoff, being able to take that payoff out of their hand and slow them down quite a bit can be really useful. And I actually also added in a Cavalier of Dawn. This is a really versatile card. Not only can we loop it with Elspeth Conquers Death for sort of a never-ending late game, but it is another way to deal with a troublesome permanent on the other side. Alternatively, you can use it to get aggressive by blowing up something like Oath of Kaya to create our own 3/3 and put another enchantment in the yard for Dance of the Manse. So you'll see that there are a lot of synergies in this deck. Both Atris and Thought Erasure can fuel Dance of the Manse as well by loading up the yard with enchantments. And the Archon of Sun's Grace is a nice way to both go wide and also get a bunch of life linkers against the more aggressive decks. Narset is a really good card against some of the Sultai Ramp decks where they have things like Uro and Growth Spiral. Turning off the additional card draw, at least on their turn, is really helpful, and it just generates a lot of value over time. So that's the main deck tech for this deck. I do want to talk a little bit about the sideboard. So in our sideboard, we have 2 main types of cards. The first is the anti-aggro cards. Since our main deck is really set up for a long game, our sideboard is pretty heavily anti-aggro slanted. We have 2 Devout Decrees against decks like Mono Red, 2 more Aether Gusts that we do bring in against the aggro decks as they are often red and or green, 2 Legion's Ends, 2 Cry of the Carnariums, a Kaya, and an Erebos' Intervention. So one of the nice things about the sideboard is a lot of the cards that we bring in against the aggro decks are also good graveyard hate cards. So Kaya, the Erebos' Intervention, can really help by taking out cards in the graveyard that your opponent might be trying to escape. The Scrabbling Claws is another piece of graveyard hate that synergizes really well with Dance of the Mance and comes down super early, so it's unlikely that our opponent can counter it. And the D-Spark, I think, is really, really good right now. It's a clean answer to things like Cavalier of Thorns, to the Wilderness Reclamation. We can play it before they untap all their lands. It gets rid of Nissa. I think that card is really well positioned. So that is the main game plan of this Esper Dance deck. And again, the additions and changes are mostly to give it more late game and a lot more game against the grindier decks. So I hope you enjoyed and give it a try. See you later.